Gabriel and Mia had been inseparable for as long as anyone in their small town could remember. From the moment they met in kindergarten, something unspoken connected them, a bond that neither could explain but both cherished. They spent their days running through the open fields, climbing trees, and daring each other to explore the woods that surrounded their sleepy village. While other children came and went, their friendship remained constant, unyielding like the river that flowed behind their homes. As they grew, their routines didn't change much. Gabriel was always the more adventurous one, pulling Mia into schemes that often ended with them both in trouble, but she never complained. She trusted him completely, following him into every wild plan with a smile, knowing he'd never let anything bad happen to her. He, in turn, knew she'd always be there, her steady presence a comfort in his otherwise unpredictable world. One particular afternoon stood out from the rest. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue over the fields. They had spent the day pretending to be explorers, creating stories about far-off lands and hidden treasures. As they sat on the old swing set behind Mia's house, Gabriel turned to her, his usual grin replaced with something more serious. "Mia, we'll always be together, right?" he asked, his voice soft, almost uncertain. She looked at him, slightly confused by the sudden change in his tone. "Of course we will, Gabriel. You're my best friend. We'll always have each other," she replied with a smile, not understanding the weight of his question, not yet. But Gabriel seemed to feel something deeper. Maybe it was the growing awareness that they were getting older, or maybe it was the way the light faded just a little quicker that evening. Whatever it was, he nodded, satisfied for the moment with her answer. "Promise?" he asked, holding out his pinky finger. Mia laughed, the sound light and easy, and linked her pinky with his. "Promise?" From that day on, the promise they shared hung in the air between them, invisible but always present. No matter what challenges came their way, they believed their bond would be enough to carry them through. Together they could conquer anything, or so they thought. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shadows, they stayed there, swinging back and forth, unaware of the twists and turns that life would soon bring. As the years passed, Gabriel and Mia's friendship remained the heart of their lives. But something subtle began to change between them. The days of carefree adventures gave way to quiet afternoons spent by the river, where conversations drifted from childhood games to dreams of the future. Gabriel noticed the change first, the way his heart seemed to beat just a little faster when Mia smiled at him, the way her laughter filled his chest with warmth. It wasn't long before Mia began to notice it too. It wasn't like anything had drastically shifted between them, yet somehow, everything felt different. There was a new layer to their connection, a quiet understanding that neither of them could put into words. Still, they didn't need to say it aloud. It was there in the way Gabriel lingered a little longer when he walked her home, or how Mia's eyes softened when they met his. One evening, the air was thick with the scent of summer, and they found themselves lying side by side on the grass, gazing up at the stars. The silence between them was comfortable, like so many times before, but tonight there was a tension neither could ignore. Mia turned her head, watching Gabriel as he absent-mindedly traced patterns in the sky. "Gabriel," she said softly, "do you ever wonder what things will be like when we're older?" Gabriel glanced at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I try not to think too much about the future. I like where we are now." She nodded, understanding what he meant, but the question lingered in the air. After a long pause, she whispered, "I think I'm in love with you." The words hung between them, a soft confession carried by the night breeze. Gabriel turned fully towards her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had felt it for a long time, but hearing her say it made everything real in a way that nothing else had. Slowly, as if the moment might shatter if they moved too quickly, he leaned in and kissed her, gentle and unsure but full of promise. When they pulled apart, Mia smiled, her heart racing. Gabriel brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I love you too." In that moment, their friendship shifted into something deeper, a love that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. Everything had changed, yet nothing felt more right. Life was perfect, or at least it felt that way to Gabriel and Mia. Their love blossomed naturally, and with every passing day, they grew more certain that their future together was inevitable. They made plans, college travel, and one day a life together. It was as though nothing could shake their connection, and the promise they made as children seemed stronger than ever. But that illusion shattered one quiet afternoon. Mia had been feeling off for weeks, though at first she dismissed it as stress or exhaustion from school. Gabriel noticed, but she brushed his concern aside with a smile, insisting it was nothing serious. Until the day she fainted. They were in the middle of the town square when it happened. her body crumpling to the ground as if all the strength had drained out of her. Gabriel was at her side in an instant, his heart pounding with fear as he called her name, his voice trembling. "Mia. Mia, wake up." She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open, but something was wrong. He could see it in her pale face, the weakness that hadn't been there before. The next few hours were a blur of hospital lights and doctors rushing in and out of the room. Gabriel sat by Mia's side, holding her hand, refusing to leave even when the doctors asked him to. His mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Mia's eyes were half open, her fingers weakly gripping his as if she was trying to reassure him, even in her own haze of confusion. Finally, a doctor entered the room, his face grim. Gabriel's heart sank as he prepared for the worst. The words that followed hit him like a punch to the gut. "Mia has a rare genetic condition," the doctor explained, his voice gentle but firm. "It's progressive and unfortunately we've caught it at a late stage. Without treatment she may not have much time." Gabriel stared at him, unable to process what he was hearing. His mind rebelled against the idea that Mia, his Mia, could be facing something so life-threatening. How long?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated before replying. "It's hard to say. A year, maybe 2 if we're lucky." Gabriel felt as though the floor had fallen out from under him. The room blurred, his thoughts a chaotic mess as he struggled to comprehend the enormity of what the doctor was saying. He glanced at Mia, who had heard everything but was staring blankly at the ceiling, her eyes wide and distant. "Mia," Gabriel whispered, his voice cracking as he leaned closer. She turned her head slowly to look at him, and for the first time, he saw the fear in her eyes. "I'm so scared, Gabriel," she whispered back, her voice trembling. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he could protect her from the reality crashing down around them. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice fierce with determination. "We'll fight this. Together." But even as he said the words, a deep, gnawing fear settled in his chest. A fear that their time together was slipping through his fingers, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. After the diagnosis, everything changed. The future that once seemed so full of possibilities now felt like a fragile dream. Every plan they'd made together, every hope they'd nurtured, was suddenly overshadowed by the ticking clock. But Gabriel and Mia refused to give in to despair. If time was against them, they would make the most of every moment they had left. They stopped talking about the future in the grand sense. No more discussions of college or career paths. Instead, their days became focused on the present, on savoring the small things that had always been there but now seemed infinitely more precious. The walks by the river, the quiet mornings spent in each other's arms, the laughter that came so easily between them even in the darkest of times. Gabriel became fiercely protective of Mia, watching her every move as if somehow by staying close, he could ward off the inevitable. Mia, for her part, didn't want to be coddled. She hated the pitying looks from strangers, the way her parents had started to hover, as if they were afraid she might slip away at any moment. With Gabriel, though, things were different. She knew he saw her as more than her illness. He still looked at her the way he always had, with love, with awe, and with a determination that broke her heart a little every day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, they sat on their old swing set, the same one where they'd made their childhood promises. Mia leaned her head on Gabriel's shoulder, closing her eyes as a soft breeze ruffled her hair. There was a peacefulness in the air but also a weight, unspoken yet felt by both. "Do you remember," Mia began softly, "when we promised we'd always be together? No matter what." Gabriel nodded, his throat tight. "I remember. And I meant it." Mia smiled, though there was a sadness behind it. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry that promise forever. It's not fair to you." Gabriel turned to her, his heart aching. "Mia, I don't care about what's fair. I care about you. I don't want to lose you. I'll be here for as long as I can." Tears welled up in her eyes and she pressed her forehead to his, their hands intertwined. "I'm so scared, Gabriel," she whispered. "But being with you makes it a little easier." He kissed her gently, his lips brushing her tear-streaked cheek. "Then we'll keep making it easier. One day at a time. We still have time." For the next few months, that became their mantra, one day at a time. Every moment they spent together became more precious, every touch more meaningful. They filled their days with as much life as they could, knowing that their time was slipping away like sand through their fingers. Just when it seemed like they had accepted the fragility of their future, a glimmer of hope appeared unexpectedly during one of Mia's routine hospital visits. Her doctor, usually cautious with his words, mentioned a new experimental treatment. an advanced gene therapy that could target the root cause of her genetic disorder. It was an option that hadn't been available before, a breakthrough still in its early stages of testing. The doctor warned them that the therapy was still experimental, with risks and unknowns, but it had shown promise in patients with conditions similar to Mia's. Gabriel felt his chest tighten as he absorbed the news. The idea that something could finally give them a fighting chance was almost too much to process. He glanced at Mia, who sat silently beside him, her fingers twisting in her lap as she listened. The therapy would involve altering the specific gene responsible for the progression of Mia's disease, the doctor explained carefully. It's not a guaranteed cure, but if it works, it could halt the degeneration and potentially give her more time. It's still experimental, but given Mia's condition, it might be her best option. Gabriel's heart surged with hope. It was a long shot, but it was a shot nonetheless. So, there's a chance this could stop the disease? Maybe even give us a future together? He asked, his voice filled with a mixture of desperation and hope. The doctor nodded slowly. Yes, it could. But it's important to understand the risks. We don't know the long-term effects, and there's no certainty it will work as intended. You both need to be prepared for the possibility that it might not go as we hope. Mia sat quietly, absorbing the information. For months, she had been preparing herself for the worst, accepting that her time was limited. Now, with this new possibility in front of her, she didn't know what to feel. Could she allow herself to hope again? Could she risk everything on an experimental therapy that might not even work? Gabriel turned to her, his eyes full of emotion. Mia, this could be it, he whispered. This could give us more time, maybe even a real future. Please, let's try. We've got nothing to lose. Mia remained silent for a moment, staring at her hands. She wanted to believe in the possibility of a future. She wanted to fight for it. But the fear of hoping, of letting herself imagine a life beyond the disease, gnawed at her. Slowly she met Gabriel's gaze. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice trembling. But, okay, let's try. The decision made, the next few weeks were a blur of preparations and consultations. Mia underwent a series of tests to determine if she was a candidate for the therapy. Each appointment brought a mixture of hope and dread, but together they pushed forward. When the day of the treatment finally arrived, Gabriel was by Mia's side, holding her hand tightly. The therapy itself was a complex procedure, involving multiple infusions of the altered genes over several sessions. As she lay in the hospital bed, her body receiving the first round of treatment, Gabriel leaned in and kissed her forehead. I'm right here, he whispered. We're doing this together. Mia managed a weak smile, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. I know, she murmured. I love you. Weeks of waiting followed, each day filled with cautious optimism. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor delivered the news they had been longing to hear. The therapy seems to be working, he said, and for the first time in months, Gabriel allowed himself to breathe. It's too early to tell how effective it will be long-term, but Mia's condition has stabilized. Gabriel felt tears sting his eyes as he clutched Mia's hand. The hope they had almost lost was back, and for a moment, it felt like their dreams of a future together were within reach. For a few blissful weeks, it seemed like the worst was behind them. Mia's condition had stabilized, and though she still felt weak at times, there were no signs of the rapid deterioration that had once been inevitable. The gene therapy was working, and with every passing day, Gabriel allowed himself to believe that they had been given a second chance. But then the first signs that something wasn't right began to emerge. It started with Mia's headaches, which grew more frequent and intense. At first, they thought it was just a side effect of the treatment. The doctors assured them it was normal, something that would pass as her body adjusted. But Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening. Mia's energy levels, which had initially improved, began to dip again. Soon she was feeling worse than before. A follow-up visit to the doctor confirmed their worst fears. The gene therapy had indeed stopped the progression of Mia's disease, but it had also triggered a completely unexpected consequence. The altered genes in Mia's body had created a unique dependency. Her survival was now biologically linked to another person, Gabriel. The doctor's explanation hit them like a physical blow. The therapy didn't just affect Mia's cells, the doctor said slowly, choosing his words with care. We've discovered that her system is now reliant on specific markers in Gabriel's genetic makeup. It's unprecedented, but essentially Mia's body has become dependent on his presence to regulate her health. Without him, her condition will worsen rapidly. Gabriel stared at the doctor in disbelief. What do you mean dependent on me? He asked, his voice rising. How is that even possible? The doctor sighed. It's not something we've seen before, but given the nature of the experimental treatment, We think the therapy formed a bond between Mia's altered cells and certain biological markers that match Gabriel's. If Gabriel's no longer in her life, physically, Mia's body will start to reject the treatment. She'll deteriorate quickly. The room fell into a suffocating silence as the weight of the revelation settled over them. So, I can't survive without him? Mia asked quietly, her voice shaking. The doctor nodded. As long as Gabriel remains close to you, the treatment will continue to work. But if you're separated for too long? His voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken truth hanging heavily in the air. Gabriel felt numb. The love that had brought them together had now become a lifeline. Literally. Their bond, once so pure, had taken on a burden neither of them could have imagined. What had started as a hope for healing had now become a curse. They were no longer just together by choice. Now Mia's life depended on Gabriel in a way that neither of them could have foreseen. The revelation left them reeling. The therapy that had given them hope had also shackled them to a reality they couldn't escape. Gabriel and Mia had always chosen each other, but now it wasn't just a matter of love, it was a matter of survival. The bond that had once felt so natural, so pure, was now a lifeline. If Gabriel stayed, Mia would live. If he left, even for a short time, she could die. 4 days, neither of them spoke much about the diagnosis. They went through the motions of their lives, pretending things were the same, but the weight of the truth pressed down on them. Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility, the knowledge that Mia's life was quite literally in his hands. And Mia felt trapped in a way she hadn't expected. The thought that Gabriel was tied to her not just out of love, but because her body demanded it, left her feeling guilty, burdened by the weight of a love that had turned into obligation. One evening, sitting by the river where they had shared so many memories, the silence between them became too much. Mia finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "This isn't fair, Gabriel," she said, her eyes fixed on the water. "You shouldn't have to live like this. I shouldn't be the reason you can't live your life freely." Gabriel's heart ached at her words. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Mia, I'm here because I want to be. I don't care what the doctors say or what this treatment has done. I love you. That's why I'm staying." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she shook her head. "But that's just it, Gabriel. You're staying because you feel like you have to. It's not just love anymore. It's survival. I can't live knowing that you're stuck with me because if you leave, I'll die." He swallowed hard, fighting back his own tears. "You're not stuck with me, Mia. I chose this. I chose you. And I'll keep choosing you every day." Mia looked at him, her expression filled with pain. "But how long will that last? What happens if one day you want something else and you can't have it because of me? You deserve to live freely, Gabriel. And I deserve to live without feeling like I'm holding you back." Gabriel shook his head, his voice breaking. "You're not holding me back. You're the reason I'm here. You're my life, Mia." For a long time neither of them spoke. The quiet of the night wrapped around them, but the weight of their situation hung heavy in the air. Mia's heart ached with love for him, but also with the knowledge that their love had become something more complex. Something that required more than just emotion. It required sacrifice. Finally, Mia whispered, "Maybe the greatest act of love is letting go." Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm saying, maybe it's time for you to live your life. Without this burden. Without me." He shook his head furiously, tears streaming down his face. No, I can't do that. I won't." But Mia's eyes were full of quiet resignation. She had made peace with the reality of her condition, with the limits of the therapy, and with the fact that Gabriel deserved more than a life spent chained to her. "I love you, Gabriel. More than anything. But I can't be the reason you don't live the life you deserve." Gabriel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he could hold on to her forever. The thought of a life without her was unbearable, but so was the idea of living with the constant fear that his presence was the only thing keeping her alive. In the end, there was no easy answer. Love, it seemed, was not just about being together, it was also about knowing when to let go. As the sun set, casting golden light across the river, Gabriel and Mia sat in silence, holding each other, both knowing that whatever choice they made, their love would always be there. Timeless. Eternal. Thanks for tuning in. If you loved this emotional story and want more captivating ones with unexpected twists, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story drops. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. We can't wait to hear what you think. See you in the next story.